Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. It seems like just about every week, we learn of more companies who are driving the woke agenda down our throats. They're spending their profits on promoting radical gender ideologies. They're training their employees in DEI, CRT, and every other racist and discriminatory philosophy known to man. And almost every company, it seems, has to buy into this diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense, and even become intentional in hiring people based on their gender, based on their skin color, regardless of skills, experience, or capability. And worst of all, people who love God, who love America, and believe in being rewarded for actual performance are being discriminated against, they're being shamed, and they're even being fired for their personal views. Well, millions of Americans have had enough, and many are doing their best to create a parallel economy that respects America and respects hard work. And our guest today has created a company to match companies and job seekers who share these timeless values. His name is Andrew Crapuchettes. He is the founder and CEO of RedBalloon, and you're going to want to get to know this company. He's a longtime business leader, he's an entrepreneur, and he's an innovator in the technology industry. Well, in 2021, Andrew founded RedBalloon, the #1 woke-free job board in America. I love that tagline. Let that sink in for a second. The #1 woke-free job board in America. And they've quickly become America's largest connector of employers and employees who prioritize a positive workplace culture free from the divisiveness of cancel culture mandates. He and his company are key leaders in creating a parallel economy that values freedom, American values, and work ethic while rejecting woke ideologies. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Always nice to have a conversation with someone like you who's out there in the fight talking about these things. So this is exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And you know, as I've gotten more and more familiar with what you're doing, of course, you're an alternative for a lot of companies that are seeking, great employees that share their values, and vice versa. Employees who have certain timeless values, American values is how I'll refer to it today, who want to find companies that are going to respect that and not discriminate. But how I first got introduced to you was through a little social media video, and you probably know this. I think it was entitled "Time to Grow Up and Get Back to Work." And it has all these young people in there talking about, oh, when I grow up, I want to work for a woke company. Oh, I want to be judged on the color of my skin, et cetera, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about how that video came to being.
Yeah, actually, I worked with a good friend of mine, Brett Craig. Brett was actually the head of chief creative officer at Deutsch LA, which is one of the largest ad agencies. So if you've seen Fansville, that was his brainchild. So he's worked on very, very big things. Brett Craig is very thoughtful, extremely creative Christian man. And he also had his own cancellation story. So he was a conservative Christian white male, so all the bad things inside of creative agency in California, and as kind of BLM and all of that stuff kind of to close around him, he said it was a 36-hour period where someone decided that they needed a sacrificial lamb, and then he was the most visible person that they could get rid of in a short amount of time. And he said it felt like the walls were closing in and there was nothing he could do about it. Anyway, he ends up leaving. He's got a wife, he's got kids. He has gone on to do amazing stuff. And what's been fun about this kind of freedom economy is I've gotten to meet lots and lots of people who are doing awesome things, but it started with a really difficult time, right? There's always this death and resurrection story that we see all throughout scripture. And I think a lot of these people, I've had my own story like that. Anyway, so Brett and I got together and I'm like, look, Brett, I don't have a lot of money, but it would be fun to create something that will kind of strike a nerve for a lot of conservatives, because there's so many conservatives today that are like, you know what? I'm just keeping my head down. I'm going to power through. We're a go along to get along crowd. And we're in a large corporation and we're going through the stupid DEI training or the stupid CRT training or microaggression training, as was happening at Silicon Valley Bank all the time. So you have all of these, and we're like, you know what? I got to feed my kids. I got to take care of my family. I'm just going to try and ignore these things. And what we wanted to accomplish in that ad was to remind people that if you don't stand up and fight and do something, you're allowing this world to not only crush you, but crush your kids, right? Your kids are going to think that this is normal.
Yes.
right? And that's the thing that I think a lot of conservatives need to remember. When we allow these narratives of boys and girls are all the same and you can be whatever gender you want, when we allow these
Yes.
narratives of we're all responsible for bad things that happened in America 200 years ago, when you allow these narratives to be out there in our schools, in our workplace, and we don't push back against them, our kids are growing up in a world thinking that's normal.
Yes.
Right. And that's very, very dangerous. So anyway, we
Yes.
were hoping that it would make people stop and think, oh, wait a minute, do I need to fight? And the answer is yes, because otherwise our kids are going to think that that world is normal and it's just something they'll aspire to.
Of course. And, if we're not contesting it, I mean, there's so much that you said there, right? If we're not willing, as the adults in the room, the ones that have the common sense, the ones that have strong faith, if we're not willing to stand up for what we believe and for truth and righteousness and just, common sense, then our kids are going to accept these narratives. They are accepting the narratives. In fact, these narratives, unfortunately, have been indoctrinated through our school systems for about the last 30 years. You and I might be the last group that didn't get indoctrinated. This is happening. So all the more reason. One of the things I loved about the video was that it feels it's funny but true. It's satire. It's Babylon Bee-esque. I mean, it feels a lot like something the Babylon Bee would produce, because it makes you it drops truth on you in a way that's funny and you can accept, and you go, hey, wait a minute, this isn't okay.
Right.
Isn't that what you were after?
Absolutely. That's right. And I think that's why it kind of resonated. And even the Joe Rogans of the world, he shared it on Instagram as the ad of the year last year, because he thought it was, it struck a nerve with a lot of people. And because we're swimming in these waters, and if you're in a workplace today, and sometimes we talk about wokeness in the workplace as the kind of this straw man of like, oh, it's bad, but we need to deal with other things. People don't realize when you are going through DEI training for the 9th time at your company, it is a liturgy that's designed to change the way you think about the world and think about other people. Right. We talk about wokeness, and it's really this putting everybody in categories to fight against each other. It's Marxism at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
We have the oppressed and the oppressor. We have the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and there's always tension. There's always fighting everybody, and everybody in the workplace has been assigned, you're in this bucket. And this group of people over here are people that you hate. And there are examples of this. I had a vice president at Microsoft call me and say, I was in a Teams meeting because she was unvaccinated. She was not allowed to come into the office. So already this weird discrimination thing. And so she put an American flag as her background for her Teams meeting.
Wow.
And she was called by HR the next day and said, just so you know, that is triggering to some of the other employees because it's a sign of white supremacy in America. So you're not allowed to have an American flag on an American company, on Microsoft of all places.
Unbelievable.
And the worst part is the next day, she said she had a coworker who had a picture of a black man being lynched. And it said, a good man died at your hands today, right? That's straight out of the CRT playbook. Anything bad that happened, because we're all in these categories of what's your skin color? You're an oppressor.
Yes.
What's your skin color? You're oppressed. No matter what you've done, no matter how you've fought to build your skill set, to work to build your career, that doesn't matter. It's who your parents are and what color skin they had, or what your sexual orientation is that you've been confused by as a kid. So this wokeness in the workplace really has an impact. I think that's one of the messages I want people to take away is don't think you are unaffected by it, because I've had lots of people who have gotten jobs through RedBalloon. They've gotten a new job where they can be free, and they write me thank you notes. I've had 3 people say, I just wanted you to know you saved my marriage. Wow. Because when you swim in those woke waters for 8 to 10 hours a day, you are going to bring it home. It's going to change the way you think about the world, how you think about other people. And it's going to have an effect on your kids, on your family. I've had people write and say, I'm going to church again because I got a new job, because a vocation, your job is such an important part of who you are. So anyway, that's my encouragement to people. Don't think that it's not having an impact on you when you're living in that woke work environment.
Yeah, so well said, and I think you've touched on a bunch of things here. Number one, you said that most people, there's a lot of people who are faced with this choice of being able to provide for their family, feed their kids, or stand up for their values and what they believe in, and their deeply held religious faith and freedom in general. And that choice, right? I know a lot of people like that, and I understand how hard that decision is going to be, because most of these big corporations are woke, and there's a lot of pressure in those. But my gosh, even in our school system, I have family, I have friends that have gone through these DEI, CRT indoctrination sessions with their companies, mandatory. And if they stand up in these moments, which some of them have done, God bless them, man. I have family members who have said, hey, I don't buy that, and I'm not going to accept that premise. And they stand up for it, but they do pay a price oftentimes. But the point is, it affects culture. The broader question is going to affect your family. It's going to affect your community. It's going to affect culture. And if we don't stand up, especially in the business community, for these values, we're in deep trouble, because it is going to infect everything else.
Absolutely. And the good news is people are standing up against these things, right? Part of the reason I wanted to start RedBalloon is because for a lot of conservatives, if we're canceled from Facebook, we're going to kind of shrug it off like, okay, well, whatever. Like, I'm, can live my life just fine without Facebook. In fact, I've now done that for quite some time. And so, I wasn't even canceled. I just didn't, so.
Oh, you would have been canceled. I mean, hey, you maybe
give me a minute. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. But we can live with that. But when our ability to feed our kids and pay our mortgage is threatened, when that cancellation is being put in front of us, we are going to be tempted to compromise on something we hold very dearly. And so, a little bit of my backstory. 3 years ago, I was the CEO of a reasonably large tech company. And my board basically said, you're too conservative and Christian for our liking, right? This is in 2020, the year the world lost their mind. I was, running this company for 15 years. I'd helped start it. I'd sold it a number of times. So unfortunately, I didn't have enough ownership to push back. Which is another story altogether. And they basically said, if you want to be a CEO who happens to be a Christian on the weekends, that's fine, but you may not be a Christian CEO. Right. And I'm like, it sounds like you want me to not bring my whole self to work. And they're like, no, it's not like that. I'm like, yes, it is like that. So I kind of faced this choice. And by the grace of God, I had the wherewithal to make the right choice and stick with my guns. I felt like it's not as bad as being thrown to the lions, losing your job, but it was the right thing to do. And my sweet wife actually gave me a really nice bottle of wine. Scotch, as a way to go. You made it through the gauntlet and you made the right decision. You lost your job. So that's part of the reason I wanted to start RedBalloon. Absolutely.
Right there. Yeah.
And that's one of the reason I wanted to start RedBalloon, because I was given that choice, and there's going to be a lot of other Americans, and there have been a lot of Americans who are also given that choice. And if you don't have the financial wherewithal, you're not just making a decision for yourself, right? You think about, all the movies we've seen where the guy has a gun held to his head. He's like, yeah, whatever. And then they hold a gun to his kid's head, and it's like, ooh, that's a different decision entirely. And that's what I think the left realized, is that if you can threaten people's jobs, you're really threatening their family. And that's going to give you way more leverage over a lot of conservatives. And that's why RedBalloon, I think, is important for America. And I've been blessed to be part of that story.
That's amazing. I think about so many different cases that are before the courts right now. I'm thinking in particular, we've got great partners with Alliance Defending Freedom, First Liberty Institute, just some great legal minds that are on the front line fighting for religious freedom, but also fighting in essence for all freedoms. Because if religious freedom falls, oh boy, we're in deep trouble. It's kind of like the free speech idea. We lose free speech, which, by the way, is teetering on the edge a little bit. Now, our friends at ADF and First Liberty, they will say that from a legal perspective, we've never lived with more religious liberty and protection than we do right now. And I had one of their experts on. And I said, well, it doesn't feel like that. So that's true, but it sure doesn't feel like it. And the ultimatum that you got, hey, well, you can't be a Christian CEO. You can be a CEO, but you can't be a Christian CEO, so to speak. That's problematic. We think about Coach Kennedy, high profile case, coach up in Washington State praying at the 50-yard line after the games. And of course, he went all the way to the Supreme Court, took him 7 or 8 years to get there. Supreme Court says, hey, wait a minute. He doesn't have to check his faith at the door. He like you said, you can be a whole human being. You bring everything that you are to the workplace. You do not have to check that at the door. The same is true in corporate settings, but we don't believe it. We're still afraid. Why are we so afraid? Are we seeing things that scare us?
Yeah, I think it's a lack of knowledge, actually.
Hmm.
I think ADF's absolutely right. We actually have a lot of religious freedom,
Yeah.
but we don't know, right? We
Yeah.
don't know what freedoms we have. We don't know what rights we have. So, which is
Mm.
a perfect tie-in. One of the
Yeah.
resources we have on redballoon.work,
Mm.
and by the way, it's redballoon.work. It's not .com, so because
Mm.
.com sounded a little bit too much like communist to me, and we
Yeah.
want work, not communism.
Oh, I
So,
like that.
yeah, redballoon.work, not
Well
communism. So,
done. Well
yeah,
done.
right. So redballoon.work. So go to redballoon.work. There's a blog. There's an employee bill of rights and
Yes.
responsibilities.
Yes.
And we actually had our labor lawyer, who's
Mm.
named Laura. So we'd like to call her Laura the labor lawyer, mostly because it's just fun to say that. But Laura the labor lawyer, she went to Harvard Law School.
Mm.
She was actually a labor lawyer in the state of California for
Mm.
20 years, fighting the good fight. So she
Amazing.
knows her stuff.
Yeah.
And she wrote in conjunction with Red Balloon, the Employee Bill of Rights and
Wow.
Responsibilities,
It's
because
great.
we understand, the founding fathers understood, that rights and responsibilities come together. And we're in a
Yes.
society where everyone wants rights, but they don't want responsibilities.
Yes.
But it was actually written for those employees, all of
Mm.
you who feel like you're stuck in that woke corporation.
Yeah.
You need to pay your kids. You need to pay you got to feed your kids, pay your mortgage,
Mm.
and you need to know what your rights are. And so that's what this document is designed for. So you can
It's
go there and for
amazing.
free download the Employee Bill of Rights and Responsibilities. And we have had tens of thousands of people download it and start to change their behavior in the workplace.
Yes.
So that's on the job seeker side. So I think we
Amazing.
just don't know what our rights are. On the
Mm.
employer side, we have a very similar story. So I talk to lots and lots of small businesses,
Mm.
and they're terrified of hiring. And they're terrified
Mm.
because if they ask the wrong question in an interview, they get a lawsuit, right?
Wow.
But if they don't ask that question, they're going to get a bad culture fit. They're going to get a lot of heartache, and then
Yes.
they're going to get a lawsuit.
Yes.
And so we're in a very litigious society
Mm.
where we might have a lot of rights, but we don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the reason that Red Balloon so we are a non-woke job board. So you can post jobs. We have a resume database. It's amazing.
Mm.
If you're a business, this is the only way you should be hiring. But
Yes.
then we actually started having businesses come to us, small businesses who
Mm.
hire a couple times a year, and say, look, I need you to take over hiring because I don't know where the pitfalls are. There's
Mm.
lots of road to run on, but the ditches on both sides both end in lawsuits. So I'd like you to help
Wow.
me stay on the road. So
Mm.
what we'll do today, and we've done this for hundreds of employers now,
Wow.
is we'll take over a position where we'll write their job posting. We will do a
Mm.
compensation review. We will build an interview rubric for them to use that is legally vetted. Then we
Wow.
will actually do the first interview for all of the candidates that apply, so that they know that by the time they're talking to someone, they're talking to someone whose values aligned and has the skill set that they need.
Amazing.
And we do this for like $4,500, which, for a small business might sound like a lot, but
Mm.
trust me, it's going to save you tens of thousands of
Oh, yeah.
dollars. And is going to save you a ton of money over using an outsourced recruiter.
Yes.
And we're doing this because we want to be a blessing to all these businesses. So
Yes.
anyway, that's what I think
Yeah.
people are so afraid in today's society, because they don't know where
Yeah.
the pitfalls are.
Yeah.
We have lots of road to run on, but if you
Mm.
don't know where the pitfalls are, you're gonna self-censor and just be too careful.
Yes.
And that's where the left has taken in a lot of ground.
Yeah. Okay. So I love this, right? I love this because the service that you're offering, that's a comprehensive service. I mean,
Yep.
if I come to you and for a small amount of money, I say to you, hey, protect me in the hiring process, help me to ask the questions I need to uncover the values that I need so that I avoid future problems. The value on that is 10x what you're talking about. I mean, it truly is,
Totally.
regardless of the size of your company. And I think what's beautiful about that is it's legally vetted. So I know I'm
Yep.
not going to get in hot water legally, and I know I've got a defense for that. But what I love also is you're that first line of vetting someone to make sure that there's someone that's going to be a fit for that company. I mean, that's a tremendous service.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And as a side note, we also source people. So
Yeah.
if we're not getting enough applicant flow, we'll actually pitch 30 people a week on your position, in
Wow.
addition to kind of covering you legally, providing that first line of defense, giving you a bunch of analytics. And
Amazing.
what's fun is, we were working with Family Radio, which is a
Mm.
Christian radio station down in Texas or Tennessee, a T
Mm.
state.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I
One
should
of the
know.
2 or 3 free
One-
states left. Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
right. And he said, you're such an answer to prayer, because whether I'm looking for a secretary or a CFO,
Yes.
I know that I don't have to worry about the legal, kind of
Yes.
dragon breathing down my neck, A, and B, I know that by the time I'm actually talking to someone,
Mm.
they're already values aligned and skill
Yes.
vetted. I just need to find out if I get along with them. And he's like,
Yes.
for $4,500,
Oh,
it is. He says the only way he's going to hire ever again.
it's amazing. I was thinking, one of the ways that you hire, of course, you're hiring for skill set, you're hiring for talent, you're hiring for some experience, but more than that, you're really hiring for culture, for a cultural fit. And by that, I mean, that has nothing to do, by the way, with race or gender or any of that nonsense. It has
No.
everything to do with beliefs, expectations, and this woke ideology, unfortunately, is all about entitlement. It's all about, wearing your offense on your sleeve. Everything's a problem. You blame everybody else for your problems. You make excuses for why you don't perform at the level you're expected to perform at. That is woke nonsense. So if you hire someone with that culture, that personal culture, you're in for a world of hurt when they start performing for your company. They're going to divide your team and they're going to underperform and they're not going to deliver for your customer. What a colossal waste of time, money, and energy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a this is a commercial right now because what you offer is so valuable.
Yeah, thank you. And I think so. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bless these businesses.
Yes.
And we did a study on what's the cost of a bad hire in your company.
Oh,
And there's a lot of good research out there. And unless you're lucky, it's north of $20,000
yes.
for getting the bad person in there. Your customers are going to get a bad experience. Your
Yeah.
other employees are going to be demoralized. The average manager spends 17% of their week dealing with the mistakes and the fallout of a bad hire. And how
Wow.
many of you in a small business environment have an extra day a week to redo work or fix work that was
Yeah.
done by the wrong person inside your
Yes.
company?
Yes.
And we also have this tight labor market, and so unfortunately, and I could go into the demographics, but we have had a low birth rate for a long time. Baby
Yep.
boomers are retiring. People don't want to work anymore. I think COVID fundamentally changed people's kind of belief about work
Yeah.
and how it was good and dignity building for their souls.
Yes.
And so we have a tight labor market. And so you're going to be left with the leftovers.
Yes.
And if the leftovers are a woke employee, we had one business who said they hired someone who was actively trying to destroy their business because it was a pro-freedom, pro-America,
Yes. Of course.
Christian business.
Of course.
And they had an employee that was leaking financial information, that was canceling customers, giving an intentionally bad experience. Like, you need to understand, these people are trying to push their worldview and will stop at nothing. They don't have the same rules
Yes.
that Christians and conservatives do. They'll do whatever they think is right. They're very Machiavellian in all of that.
Yes. Yes. And I've had friends who are entrepreneurs as well who have experienced that very thing. And it takes time to weed them out. We used to always say, however long that bad employee's been with you, the cost to you is going to be 3x whatever it cost during that period. So if they're with you for a year, it's going to cost you 3 times that amount to
That's
fix what they destroy and to repost, re-interview, rehire, train, develop. Oh my gosh. That hire is so important. You got to get it right.
Yep, absolutely. And when you don't get it right, we know the cost.
Yes.
But when you do get it right,
Yes.
it is a delight. I had one employer who said, everybody I hire through RedBalloon is cleansing to my culture because they're a
Amazing.
hardworking conservative
Yes.
who shows up, works hard, has a good attitude,
Yes.
has innovative ideas, right?
Mm.
I talked to some of the employees that were at Silicon Valley Bank after they went out of business, and they were like, yeah, we had microaggression training every single week. And there were people in the credit department that knew that the bank was going to go out of business, but they also knew that if they said anything about it, it would be called a microaggression, and they would get tarred and feathered in front of everyone. So they're like, I guess I'll just ride this iceberg down into the ground.
Yes.
So unfortunately, that's those are the juxtaposition between these two different environments
Yes.
that you have in these workplaces.
Yes.
And I think, in one sense, and I'm an optimist, I think it's encouraging, because what's going to happen is conservative Christian businesses that take care of their customer, that care about their customer, that innovate, that hire good people, they are going to thrive no matter what the administration does, no matter what the economy does.
Yes.
And the businesses that are so focused on not their business, DEI training, CRT training, microaggression training, whatever it is, they're spending a lot of time and energy on something that has nothing to do with their business. And eventually they're either going to struggle or fail. And so, the way God built the world, people who work hard and care about their customers generally do well. And people who don't work hard and don't care about their customers don't do well. Ta-da. So that's the good news. We're on the right side.
Yeah, exactly. We are going to win this. And you do feel the pendulum swinging, right? Because the woke nonsense has come to light. I call COVID the great exposure.
Yes.
It's when all this nonsense, but worse than nonsense, really evil, has come to light. There's so much stuff happening to our kids in school, in our business communities, to shut down the economy. I mean, there's 100 ways that this has been exposed. But I believe that small business in particular, and by small business, I mean businesses smaller than Intel and Microsoft and
That's right.
the big boys, the rest of us, right?
Yeah.
You could be $1 billion business and still be a small business. It's small business that is going to fix the culture. Yes, it's going to be family. Yes, it's going to be policy. But I'm telling you, small business, because of what you're talking about, it's a return to those, what I would consider biblical values, American first values, hard work, the things that were listed at the Smithsonian as racist ideas. All of those things about work ethic and being on time and being respectful and treating others as you want to be treated, all these biblical values, they are coming back in a big, big way. What I love about, so many things you've said, you talk about microaggressions and we didn't talk about unconscious bias, which I love, is like, hey, you don't even know that you're, egregiously flawed. You don't even know that you're an oppressor, even though you don't act like one and you never said anything like an oppressor. You don't know it. It just is. And we're going to condemn you because of it. All that nonsense is rooted in Marxism. You mentioned it early on in this conversation. These are tools of Marxism to divide us, right, into the elite class and everybody else, which, by the way, the goal is to impoverish everyone else. I don't know if anyone's, paying attention to this, but the idea is divide us so that we can't come together and stop what the elite are doing. And I love this idea that the businesses restoring these values, coming back to center, saying, no, we're going to work hard. We're going to provide a great service and a great product at a great value. I do believe that is going to cause a resurgence in America.
Yeah, it is a winning strategy. And I guess my encouragement to all of the people listening is we have an opportunity as Americans, as Christians, to do something different. And it's so easy. We talk about the really big businesses, the Amazons, the Intels, the Microsofts of the world. We have an opportunity to change our habits to be able to bless this freedom economy. And you can think of it as safety, because if the only search engine out there is Google, and we all know that they are pushing a leftist agenda, then if in the future you want to find something out, you're being fed a line of information because that's your only option out there. Right? If you are only, as an employer, using Indeed.com, which is the biggest job board out there, who canceled Answers in Genesis because they're a Christian organization. They said, you're never allowed to post on Indeed. They canceled a large construction company in Texas that we know of because a company called themselves freedom-loving and God-fearing. And that was a violation of community standards, right? If you only support Indeed will only get bigger and stronger. But if you come over and support a RedBalloon, or if you start to spend money on a public square, or if you move your money to Old Glory Bank, or instead of using Stripe, use Revere Pay. If you, instead of using Amazon Web Services, use Liberation Tech or Patmos or one of these other businesses, it's a safety measure for you and your family, because then when they come after you, there is a parallel economy that is on your side. And so when you spend your dollars, when you spend your time and your energy supporting people who are part of your team, then your team is stronger. And then all of a sudden, if someone comes for you, you have an entire parallel economy that is built up, stable, profitable, and is able to support and continue to thrive and bless your family. So that's my encouragement to people is, don't try and fix the world in 1 minute. Do one thing different tomorrow, and then do another thing different the next day to support people on your side. And if you do that, you're going to build a safety net just in case things get worse.
I love that. And we're also not giving resources to companies that we know are using it against us. I mean,
totally.
How satisfying is that? I was thinking about, we've seen these companies that have made mistakes, like Bud Light, Bud Light is a punchline. Well, I hope you've been enjoying this first part in a two-part series with Andrew Crapuchettes, the CEO and founder of RedBalloon, the #1 woke-free job board in America. Stay tuned for part 2. You're not going to want to miss that. See you next time.